Okay, the recording is going.
Very good. So hello everyone, this is another episode in the webinar series, part of the portfolio activities for the MedTech portfolio at the EAC, European Innovation Council. And as you know, we run this webinar series to try to bring some experts to you, some expertise on topics you're struggling with or challenges you're having and that we see are common within the portfolio. So today we're focused on a topic that comes up all the time. When you submit your business plans and your proposals to us, we and the evaluators always come up with the same question, suggestion, statement. You have to do your team should be stronger. You need a stronger CEO, you need a stronger CFO, you need a salesperson, you need a production, regulatory. And we always ask you to build the perfect team, no? This is the dream team. But then how do you do that? And usually entrepreneurs use their own network, but the network goes so far only. What other options do you have? So we thought it was good to get you in contact with the industry of executive search firms, in particular in the MedTech domain. So today we have the pleasure to have, and I'm really grateful that Ajay and Tom found the time to be with us. We have two experts in the domain of executive search, particularly in MedTech, life sciences, and digital health. Both Ajay and Tom work at the Mullins Group, which is a global firm, and they cover together Europe, Asia, and Pacific. And again, I'm really grateful, Ajay and Tom, that you could carve out some time for us, not just for the webinar, but for the prep talks, for the slides. You know, it takes time, so I really appreciate you managed to do this. So let's get started. Ajay, perhaps you could give us a bit of background about yourself. How did you get into this industry? What did you do in the past? And maybe Tom, you can follow on after Ajay. Thanks. Go ahead.
Sounds good, Enric. And everybody from the EIC cohort. Pleasure to meet everybody. Enric, thank you so much for the opportunity. We absolutely love doing things like this. So I'll give you a brief, just a tiny intro on myself, and then I'll let Tom introduce himself as well, and then I'll jump into the session. So Ajay Nair, or Ajay Nair, however you want to pronounce it. I'm originally American, but started my career at Johnson & Johnson right out of university. Had a bioengineering background, worked for Ethicon, started in product development, and then moved into sales, and pretty much had a remaining part of my career was entirely commercial. So sales, marketing, and then officially sales leadership. And the last element is I've been probably part of 5 major medical device companies global. And of the last 3 years, I've been entirely focused on startups. So MedTech, med device startups is my passion, is my sweet spot. And as I was sharing with Jonas right before we kicked off the call, 11 years of experience in the US and the remaining 12 internationally. So that's a little bit about me. I'll transition to Tom.
Thank you, Ajay.
Thanks, Ajay. Again, thanks so much for your time. My background, not as in depth as Ajay's into the medtech world. Straight out of university into the HR recruiting space, doing a lot of talent access and acquisition work in the IT space. Over the last 4 or 5 years, really transitioning into medtech, biotech, life science, and digital health off the back of that as well. Just over 3 years with the Mullins Group, really focusing on a full international market as well across US, Canada, UK, Europe, and then into APAC as well.
Very good. Thank you both. I forgot to mention to the audience, please do ask your questions on the chat. And then after the slides, I will read your questions to Tom and Ajay, and that will be the Q&A. So please do keep writing your questions in the chat as we go along. So these two profiles are interesting, no? Because I think these are representative of the industry. You have the person who has been working for many years, either in product development, sales, marketing, and then this person switches to building teams, and the person who has been working across various industries, but focusing on executive search. So it's kind of an interest. I imagine these are 2 typical profiles in the industry, no? So the industry person who switches into team building, and the team building person who has been working across various industries, seeing different strategies, no, to capture executives across different industries. you both represent, I think, geographically, professionally, kind of the broad industry, no, in executive search.
Yeah, I'll let Tom address his executive search kind of background and what he sees. But the interesting thing for me is I've been a candidate looking to get jobs for almost, I'd say probably 11 years of my life, looking to ascend into higher and higher roles and greater responsibility. And then right around my 10th, 11th year, I started becoming a hiring manager. I was building teams, and the team started growing in size, P&L sizes grew. So I've, up until probably about a year ago, when I joined the Mullings Group, my perspective has always been two sides of the coin. I'm either a candidate looking for a role, or I'm a hiring manager looking to build these teams. The beautiful thing about me joining the Mullings Group and then now applying my knowledge in executive search is I get a third seat, right? I get to watch high profile candidates or high profile hiring managers or just very exciting, complex companies trying to build teams. And I get to navigate that. But Enric and others, perhaps the privilege that I have is I've been in one shoe or another. So often when I talk to people, I've either been there doing what they're doing, or I've been the hiring manager facing those challenges. So it's been a unique perspective after 22 years coming into executive search.
Yes, very good. Any comments about that, Tom?
Yeah, I'd agree with Ajay there as well. I've worked across multiple industries, and we often see the similar stages that we see in medtech, life science, biotech companies. But the fact that our organization has been able to couple really strong talent access individuals with industry leaders like Ajay who've come into the organization just creates a really powerful go-to-market strategy that we have for a lot of organizations, be that right the way through their phases of development as well. So yeah.
Very good. Thanks for that. So let's get started with the slides, if you like. Ajay, I think you can share. You should have the rights to share, I think.
Yes.
So that's
Can
perfect. Thank you.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So if I may get started, again, thank you so much for the opportunity. We're really thrilled here because the more we get to talk about sort of what we're passionate about, this is really what we do. And so it's nice to take our heads out of our day-to-day roles and really share the things that work for us. So the topic today, sort of paraphrasing a little bit, but really what we've done is try to distill strategic. We often refer to this as strategic hiring. It's really important to think long term. So we think of it as strategic hiring for life science startups, ranging from medtech, pharma, diagnostics, whatever it may be under the life science umbrella. As you all have seen a little bit about our background, so I run, even though my label for the Mullings Group, aka TMG, is Search APAC, I actually work very intimately close with Tom, and we practically run Europe, Middle East, and Asia. So really, we're the international team for the Mullings Group. Myself come with about 22, 23 years of experience, and Tom comes from extensive experience within the executive search, not just in medtech, but he's branched out. However, really where we're focused on today is medtech, medical device. That's our area of focus. Tom, by the way, is part of our UK office, and I split my time between Singapore and Australia. So I sort of run the APAC quadrant in terms of actual physical presence. So we've kind of put this presentation together into three sort of sections. First section, we really want to just talk a little bit about the Mullings Group, and this will feed into our skill sets as well. But we thought it'd be a good opportunity to let everybody know who we are, what we do, and most importantly, what are our credentials? I mean, what have we done in the industry, and why perhaps should you pay attention to some of the stuff that we're saying? So section one is the Mullings Group. Section two, probably really most apropos, is we start talking about our perspective on the startup journey. This is where we really talk about what we think and what we see in terms of companies, and depending on what stages they are, translating into what they're looking for in terms of teams, people, and how they're making those considerations. And maybe the last section, hopefully is very relevant to everybody, is where we really index on tips, tricks, good practices that we've seen. So really our goal is to kind of do these 3-section overview. So let me jump into the Mullings Group. We're very, very well known in the US. We've been in the business for 30 plus years and heavily in MedTech, MedDevice. Again, you know, stats for whatever it's worth. We've worked with over 800, actually over 900 plus companies. These stats, by the way, every 6 months, these numbers roll, right? Because our work continues. So 900 plus companies, 9,000 plus successful searches. And by the way, this last statistic on followers on social, like it or not, we are a social media driven world now. And we often, and this will be relevant later as we talk about our media arm, we always pay attention to the people that are following us and vice versa. We want to produce content that people find interesting. So that's one of the reasons why we track that metric. Our offices, so we are a global presence. We have in the Americas, what we call Canada, US, Latin America. We have 2 offices, Florida and Canada. We have our European presence in the UK, and then I run the APAC offices, and I split our business between Singapore and Australia. What areas do we work in? The short answer, really all within MedTech, MedDevice, but we really, really have expertise working with these areas. Now, if I was to bubble it down, cardiac is a heavy area of expertise for us. We've been part of many startups. And beyond that, we've been part of startups that have then been acquired by the larger players. So cardiac is a huge area of expertise for us. Outside of that, surgical robotics, if you actually follow the Mullings Group prior to this session or will start following us after the session, which we hope, you'll see that we have a heavy interest towards surgical robotics just because we've built almost a 15-year leadership presence there. We were part of Verb Surgical, we were part of CMR, we've been part of Intuitive, so we've been part of a lot of the leading surgical robotics companies, so that's been a huge area of focus for us. And the third vertical, which is really around digital, AI, wearables, telemedicine, telehealth, way before COVID and how the pandemic changed things, we've been part of this digital transformation for quite some time now. So those are some umbrella areas of our expertise. So why are we interesting to young companies? By the way, the Mullings Group, and you know, there are lots and lots of good executive search companies out there. But you have to understand, a lot of companies have areas of expertise. If you look at the larger players, for example, Korn Ferry, Heidrick, very high expertise when it comes to C-suite, boards, advisory, psychological assessments. You know, there are areas of expertise that they have. The Mullings Group's expertise is really about scale and growth. And that's why we work a lot with young companies. Now, I don't want to just say startups because startups almost imply you're in the seed stage. We like to call them growth stage, right? You could be anywhere in that growth trajectory, regardless of your funding. But the point is you're trying to grow. And a lot of our expertise in the last 20 years have been around, we understand the journey that young companies go through. Raising capital. Oftentimes, if you work with, you know, executive search firms, they'll say, once you raise that money, contact us, right? But our approach is different. We understand the fundraising challenge. We've been part of many young companies that have tried to raise. We work with you. And if we can share our network of venture capitalists, private equity, if we can help you with your pitch, we get involved in many stages of a young company's journey. So this is not an exhaustive list, but we've just put some key areas here. We know raising capital. We definitely know commercialization because that's one of my areas of expertise from a global standpoint. We are heavy experts when it comes to clinical trial management. We help companies run clinical studies all over the world. And we often help them with their first hires when it comes to clinical trial management. We understand how to build boards. We are very familiar with the regulatory strategy, reimbursement strategy. And last but not least, you know, every investor's dream, we understand the exit strategy, right? Every VC, every private equity firm is looking at what is your exit plan. So that's an area that we have quite a bit of expertise in. And many of the companies we worked with have exited to larger players. So I'll start this sort of what we think are the young company's journey, and then I'll transition to Tom, who'll take us through some of the criteria. But we often refer to a young company's journey. And by the way, it's not subscribed to just very young companies. We've seen mature companies go through it as well. But I tried to find a graphic that describes it. We see 3 distinct stages. We call stage 1 the early stage, which is pretty much from ideation to some form of minimal viable product, design validation, prototype that's ready to go to market, or even prototypes that are ready to go into animal and very importantly, first in human studies. So the very first stage we consider to be what we call the early stage. And there are specific criteria that we think in terms of hiring in this area that's important. Second stage, we consider to be once your product is relatively at point of freezing, that's where the real validation, verification, clinical study segment takes place, right? And in the MedTech, MedDevice world, a extremely go, no-go type of scenario. By the way, very similar for pharma, very similar for diagnostics. I've spent time at Lilly. I've been part of products where lots of funding, lots of, Eli Lilly, by the way, lots of funding, building of teams, a clinical study doesn't work out, the entire franchise is shut. So it's not dissimilar in pharma, but that second stage is just hypercritical. But from a hiring standpoint, it's a whole different set of criteria. It's really your first scale and build. So we see it as sort of design freeze to clin reg approvals. That's your stage 2. Stage 3, the drive to commercialize, right? This is where every VC and every PE that you're part of, or every private investor, this is their dream. They want to see you grow, scale, revenues, and what's your exit plan. And that's a whole different set of criteria from a hiring standpoint. So 3 distinct stages that I'll set the stage, and then I'll share kind of one more thing to kind of preface Tom, and then I'll let him talk about criteria. So this is really important, right? I'm setting the stage for tips, tricks, strategic hiring, regardless of which stage you're in, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Leadership defines a hiring brand. Now, I really want everybody to focus on our phrase hiring brand, because the adage is you want to be a company that people want to come and work for, rather than being a company that you want to go out and seek people to work for you. And we've just seen that in our hiring, our teaching, our mentoring, our coaching practices. The more you define your company's hiring brand, the stronger you become marketability-wise, hiring-wise, people gravitate towards you. So it's not just limited to a CEO, but leadership defines hiring brand. However, definition and setting the stage for hiring brand is really, really important. In this day and age, individuals in the market are constantly watching. Whether you're a publicly listed company, for example, in Australia, you can be 0 revenue and be on the stock exchange. So you have a whole bunch of shareholders watching what you're doing. Versus in the US, you have to be millions in revenue before you can list. But individuals are always watching from ideation to whatever else you're doing. LinkedIn, headlines, news, what's the leadership saying? What are you saying at conferences? What are you presenting? What expectations are you sharing? Investor circles, people are paying attention. And last but not least, and this is the theme that we want to take throughout this presentation, create a reason for the best talent to follow you. That's the best way to hire talent, right? Rather than, hey, we're 2 years in the mix, we've been in here for a while, now all of a sudden we need to hire people, you've never heard of us. That's a huge uphill battle. But if you create a reason, and we really love this phrase, force multipliers. What that means are people who amplify you in every way. Your brand, your revenue, your skill. So create a reason for the force multipliers to follow you. So with this, I'll transition to Tom, and we'll talk about hiring considerations per stage.
Yeah, so generally speaking, we're seeing around about 3 stages of company growth and hiring. So from pre-seed to pre-clin reg, right the way through to commercial acquisition or expansion as well. generally speaking, obviously there's nuances in between there as well as to where we need to be, but generally speaking, the key hiring considerations that we're looking at for each stage is, pre-seed right the way through to Series A, Series B. That's going to be your pre-clin reg side of things. You're starting to really look at bringing your core team into place, and that will be individuals that will likely work with you throughout the growth of the organization. We're looking at strong engineering lead, individuals who will be able to do early stage qual, clin, reg, and really diving into what that market looks like that you're going to be driving your company into. We'll be looking at bringing the right advisors in and around you as well. Hypercritical point to bring these individuals in. So we might be looking at advisors with significant domain experience. Let's say our organization's in ophthalmology, in cardiac. Are we bringing the right advisors in who have that domain experience to support the growth of the organization? And then really, individuals who have that investor relation, a good investment source portfolio as well. That's, that early stage to get the ball rolling. As we step into that, clin reg, pre-commercial still side of the organization and growth, we're looking at that early C-suite, bringing in or transitioning that CEO into place who can take the organization to the next step. We might be looking at bringing in a CFO, a CTO who can really drive the strategy. And off the back of that, we might be looking at more of a hands-on technical leader, VP of R&D, Chief Strategy Officer to really push the product and the most valued product forward. What we'd be looking at this phase as well, and whilst not necessarily directly hiring, is individuals who can identify and bring in those lead investors as well as the follow-on investors off the back of that as well. And obviously, as the product continues to go from that R&D phase into the clinical phase and thinking about the commercial, we need clinical trial leaders, people who can set up sites, all that good stuff, and then transitioning into that Series D commercial potential acquisition and then expansion, real growth of the organization. We'd be looking at individuals who can bring in those strategic partnerships, as well as the follow-on C-suite as well, CCO, global sales teams, direct, indirect sales as well. And then as we step into that, we'll go through the stages. So stage one, if we just jump the slide there. So this is what we're really looking at, kind of C-level criteria and a compensation guide. And just an FYI, that is just a guide. We know there's different nuances in businesses, so we can chat about that in a different subject. But generally speaking, at stage one, we're seeing your C-level to, or certainly the organization to be early stage of development. So the C-level will be founders, spin-outs of universities. They've got their most valued product, but the focus of the organization is really technology build, high-level focus on R&D, starting to look at that quality management, product dev, and the clinical strategy early stages to how we move the organization through to the next stage. Generally speaking, C-suite individuals at this point, we're probably looking around 125 to 200 on base, milestone-based bonuses. We often see a lot of consultant CEOs coming in at this level, either from the lead investor that we have, who's got 2 or 3 projects going on at the same time, who can really drive the business forward. Generally, there'll be individuals with significant domain experience to get it through to the next phase of development, which is our stage 2 of the organization. Stage two is generally that quite significant transition phase, where we're going from research project, we've got the ideas of a good product, but really taking that into a true business model. How do we scale an organization? How do we really drive product forward? So realistically, this is where an individual is going to come in with, a strong background in mid to level capital raise, really focused on product development and understanding of the clinical strategies. They'll also have a light commercial focus. So again, understanding of strategic partnerships. What that might be is, it could be strategic organizations, your Boston Science, Medtronics of the world, but it also could be that manufacturing CMO aspect where, we can rely on individuals to support us from a manufacturing scale up as well. But also starting to think about those early stage exit strategies that are being developed there as well. Again, generally, we're looking at individuals who will have that strong R&D product development background, understanding of how to develop strategies and taking the platform through to that clinical trial aspect. Another key area here as well is where a lot of the business itself is going to be defined. We call it the 4 pillars, which is mission, market, team, and product. So generally speaking, this is where an individual and organization will really define what their mission is going to be over the next 2 to 4 years. What the market is, so what's the value add, where are we going as an organization. The team itself is the scale up hiring strategy, bringing in the right people in the right areas at the right time. And also the product, really defining the product. What is that MVP? What is the strategy to take that through to the next phase of development, or Gen 2, or going into that commercialization phase as well, which is where we see it stage 3. So stage 3 is, really how we take this, an organization, a product company through to the next level. So C-level criteria at this point is going to be a heavy indication on fundraising for commercialization strategies, or really executing on those strategic partnerships that we mentioned in stage 2. Off the back of that as well, we're looking at an individual with a really strong commercial background generally, ability to build strategic commercial teams, market development, business development, sales. That could be direct, indirect. Generally speaking, when we get to this level on the comp side of things, we're elevating a little bit more, very focused on sales bonuses, exit bonuses, strategies. That's what we're really focusing on from that comp level as well. So we want to run through a couple of case studies that we've personally been part of from a partnership perspective, and what we've really seen in a lot of these organizations. One of which is a surgical robotics company based out of Europe. So just to give you and set the scene, which I imagine a lot of organizations who will listen to this have been part of. They were in academic research, span out in 2017. They got to a Series A by their executive chairman. Again, significant domain experience, really solid advisor to the organization. Where they're at right now is, first in humans taking place, phase 2 innovation development is in the pipeline. How do we elevate the product, elevate the company to that next level? So current CEO, if we're going back into our stages, is stage 1 CEO, probably more on the late stage, but founder, R&D leader, significant, technologist, really strong on the robotics side of things, really driving development, can take the prototype to first in human, has been able to support that seed Series A. Where the business is at right now is, how do we elevate to that next phase of development? So we want to do complex Gen 2 development, really, driving that platform build. But of course, that comes with significant Series B to Series C raise. So, mid-level commercial discussions, corporate strategic partnerships. This is what the organization is really requiring to get to that next phase of development, which is in that stage 2, early stage 3. What we're looking at and what we're looking at from a future CEO perspective is somebody who is that stage 2, early stage 3, mid to high level raise experience, and real expertise in platform development. So quite often we still need individuals who have a technology background, an understanding of how we take something from R&D to product development, and really, defining what that strategy looks like, and also a thought process on that exit strategy, strategic partnerships, potential sale as well. Next case study is regarding a cardiac company. So slightly different focus, a little bit more kind of jumbled in the sense of stages that they've gone through. So founded in 2012, real strategic interest and investment from the outset. Went through multi-series funding, really competitive field, and the organization candidly has gone through a lot of R&D pivots in that phase. Current CEO, really strong commercial leader. Given the change in market, we've seen a lot of pivots happening there as well on the R&D side of things. So struggle to really define where the product is really going, what the MVP actually is in the organization, and to the market itself as well. So good cap raise experience, but the requirement really is somebody who's technology minded, can take something from being that R&D project and defining what the product strategy is going into the next phase of development. But also, we still need that capital raise experience. So future CEO in that organization is going to be that more stage 2 focused CEO, mid to high level raise, platform development experience, and really how do we push the development forward of the platform and the product, and real land and expand across, you know, a couple of different markets as well. Going into the next case study, IVD Organizations, a US diagnostic company, again founded in 2009, university research, which a lot of these organizations, part of this presentation will feel. Organization, you know, successfully gained non-dilutive funding, got a lot of, you know, grants involved there as well, and we're able to go through that CE mark, and you know, and really, you know, focusing on what that commercial strategy looks like. Current CEO has done a phenomenal job at, you know, really gaining that private funding. So being able to step away from that non-dilutive side of things, showing that there is private interest and, you know, investor focus there as well. Led the IP and development of the corporate structure. So really giving a solid kind of bedrock to the organization, you know, for that next phase of development. And really, you know, supported on that reg filing, strengthened the company position in the market, which is, you know, really important factor to get that next round of investment as well. Individual stepped into a board level role, and then the new CEO kind of came in, really focused on commercialization and expansion, scale up operations based on what the previous CEO had done from a bedrock perspective, and really solidifying the organization from a market perspective.
Thank you, Tom. So hopefully, as you can all see, and the reason why we've arranged it this way, and I promise I will wrap up pretty soon to give everybody time for question and answers as well. But the reason why we've organized it this way is to really explain to everyone how we see this world in stages and where we really get involved. I mean, our group really gets involved, but you know, the knowledge base is for you to be aware of as well. We almost feel like stage 2 and 3 is so critical that we always advise our clients to say, don't think of hiring as a consequence of funding. Think of it as strategically as possible, as proactively as possible. Funding just makes it happen. But start thinking in terms of those really important aspects of where your company's headed early. And when it comes to talent, right, this is a very important thing to know. Those that you need to hire are not often looking for jobs. Some of the best talented people, and this applies even, you know, in my experience with working with senior executives, most of the people, and that's the whole point of why organizations like TMG, Korn Ferry, Heidrick exist. We're not advertising roles. We have a network of people we're approaching. And so some of the best talent in the world are not looking for jobs, but we talk to them about the company, and then we start prying their interest. This is why that hiring brand is really important, because when we approach people, for them to go, oh yeah, I've heard of this company, that's the beginning of the hiring brand. So that's why hiring brand continues to be a critical component in attracting talent. This is something I absolutely love to say. Build a brand that attracts top talent, not hire people to build a brand, right? It's really the order of things really matter. We spend so much time branding our product, building our product, but do we really spend a lot of time building our brand? And then after the fact, you know, let's say, and this commonly happens, and Tom can attest to this too, we often deal with companies who are like, oh, the founding team is just phenomenal, but we never spent any time building them up. Now we're going to invest on the next stage of people we're going to hire. Well, what about the people that actually incepted your company? I mean, these are the founders. Regardless of what equity they have, they are the founding team members of your company. So building that brand, that first hiring brand, is really important. And look, in this day and age, people are going to call people and say, hey, you work there, or even worse, you used to work there. What is your opinion on the company? And that's a really important thing, right? So how do you appear to your future team members? Who will people become when they work for your company? This is all a proactive mindset of thinking about your brand early. We will gladly share this tool free of charge. I'm being facetious. Tom talked about 4 pillars, right? And this is something, even though I've spent 23 years of my career and I feel like I knew this, in actuality, doing this exercise, this is the point of actually getting into tips and strategies. Doing this exercise, no matter how simplistic it feels, is absolutely powerful. So we call this the 4 pillars, right? It's market, product, team, and mission. It's not an order of importance or less importance, it's just the order. So you think about it, where will your market be for your company, your brand in the next 5+ years? Most importantly, are you differentiating? Is there a market? Or are you becoming a Me Too product that has an oversaturation of players? So it's really important to understand this. Where are you going? Logically, product or service, how does it actually address this need that you've identified in the market, right? It's a logical sequence. And this is the piece where investors or whomever is going to be part of your company is really going to want to know, how are you addressing the problem or the need? Team, who will I work with? What does my team look like in the future? You know, investors often want to know, when do you plan on scaling? What is your scale plan? And all of that needs to be kind of thought through. And, you know, it needs to be said, I hope everyone knows this, but I just reinforce, these things can change. These are dynamic, but it's all about how you address that agility, how you, you know, like Tom said earlier, one of our clients, they've been working in their R&D for 10 years because the market kept changing. So they had to refund, change the product in order to change with the market. They didn't give up, they just kept evolving, right? Same thing applies for team and culture. It has to keep evolving, not static. And lastly, mission. This is really important for people when they join you. What do you do? And very, very important, why do you do it? Right? What's the why? A very famous Simon Sinek book, Start with Why. That's a really important exercise. So whenever we work with people, we always, no matter how simple and how banal this feels, we always do this exercise. Now, Enric warned me to say, please don't use US jargon. So I will do my best, right? But I hope this is not US jargon. It's really important, your first hires matter. And, you know, oftentimes, and I've been in the same situation, right? When I'm building a young business, sometimes I'm just trying to hire people to get the work done. But it's really important to sometimes step back and go, are these people lightning rod hires? Are these people the ones that you can build around, right? In corporate management and global leadership, we always talk about, can you build the team around these individuals? And we call that the lightning rod hires. These are the people that attract future talent. So that's really important to think of. And let me go into price law a little bit. This is really just an over enhancement of the Pareto law, right? Oftentimes in business, we say 20% of individuals produce 80% of the work. That's not to demean anybody. It's sometimes, you know, in sales is an easy example. You have 10 reps on your team. Sometimes 2 of the best reps produce 80% of the revenue or 80% of the growth. It's a natural mathematical kind of progression. So we at Mullings Group always talk about, let's focus on the hunted. What that means is, these are the people not looking for jobs, so let's actually go looking for them. They are the ones that are hunted. They're really good at what they do. That's who we want to focus on. We focus on force multipliers, people that are best in their business and really understand why. Price's law, we always look at the square root of the people in the domain do 50% of the work. You don't have to memorize this formula, but it's, again, a similar application of the Pareto law. You have to think about your best talent and how, really important, when you're adding people into an already performing team, are they going to multiply your team? That's really important to think about, right? The culture that you have today versus the culture you're trying to build. And also very important, and again, the reason for existence of people like ourselves, those that are really good at what they do are not on LinkedIn looking for jobs sometimes. They are, now situationally, that may happen, but often they are down, head down, solving problems. And so you really have to take that extra effort to try and look for people. So we've just tried to kind of distill some tips and tricks, 4 pillars, focusing on the hunted, Price's law, just that mindset, and some key takeaways. I like to stress, especially to young growth, startup oriented companies, please don't think of hiring as a function of funding. Think of hiring very early in your business. When you action, maybe a different thing, but start strategically thinking about your company and who you want to be part of it early. We like to share the fact that an innovation journey comes in stages. We understand the funding cycles, and we always try to teach our clients the criteria you should be looking for at each stage, what's important to them. It's very important when you hire leadership and when you build culture, culture has to work up and down. And what that means is from a C-suite level, board culture really matters, right? If you have a board that is dysfunctional, toxic, that culture permeates down into an organization. So culture really matters up and down. And this is something that I truly believe in. Valuation, everybody in this day and age, ever since the .com era, everyone just talks about valuation, right? It's all about valuation. It's all about exits. And oftentimes people just talk about valuation in terms of product and technology. But in my mind, Tom's mind, a lot of our Mullings individuals, exits are a function of the culture and the people that you built in the company. What's memorable when a company exits are the people that built it rather than the product and the tech. So I'll pause here. If all this resonates with you, give us a call. We're happy to help, but we'll now transition to questions. And thank you very much.
Thanks both for the presentation. It's such an exciting way of analyzing the path of a company. I think we tend to think a lot about product and technology because many of us come from the technology side. And you keep thinking, okay, I'm going to develop the prototype, the MVP, then I'm going to do the preclinical, and you think product, you don't think building a company as building a team. And as I was listening to you, I was looking at things completely from a different angle. The company is building the team, and the team creates the valuation and the exit. It's such an exciting way of looking at things. So some thoughts from you, some tips, some ideas that could be useful for the audience. In terms of building the brand, so I always think technology. I think many of the companies in the portfolio think technology, but how can we build the brand at early stages? Are we talking about having somebody in the team just working on LinkedIn and Twitter, or going to LSI, LSX in practice, Monday to Friday? How do you build a brand to attract the team? Ideas? Any who wants to take this? Just
Yeah.
whoever feels.
Yeah, I'll maybe start because I've some knowledge of doing this and some painful knowledge of doing this. I won't give my age away, but obviously I'm from a time where social media wasn't always used in building a brand. And I worked in corporate when social media became heavier and heavier, right? Like we didn't know how to do it, but we knew we had to do it. And there was building a brand in terms of creating awareness of therapy. That's one approach where we were trying to tell people, I'll give osteoarthritis as an example. The people who suffer from osteoarthritis tend to be obviously 55 and older. And you had to understand there's an ecosystem of people who suffer from it, and there's an ecosystem of people who take care of the people who suffer from it. Mm-hmm. So we had to find a way to learn to speak to both. And when we were a young company, we did, old school way was newspapers, right? Now we evolved into, okay, so-and-so physician has used our product, or there's a clinical study that's been done and here are the results. So it really is a matter of sharing with your broader audience the knowledge that you as a company are trying to propagate in the most professional manner, right? I'm a huge advocate of science, data, but really what that means, Enric, is also about what this means to you, right? So whenever I've tried to do, whether it's a newspaper ad, an Instagram ad, a LinkedIn ad, I've always tried to share what the study means to the person who's suffering from osteoarthritis is, and then talking about it. So when you create, and believe me, I've been in the world where we've not been able to afford a media person or a marketing person or an agency. So yes, you have to do the hard work, you have to do the postings, you have to share, but it really is about finding a cadence, a frequency of sharing, and really simplifying that knowledge. And most importantly, what does this mean to the person reading it? Why is it important? I hope that answers a little bit of what you asked.
Yeah, it does. It does. Tom, any thoughts on this brand building
Yeah,
strategy?
I think AJ kind of hit the nail on the head there at the end. There is it sounds very basic and simple, but it's actually one of the hardest things to do is just consistency. We mentioned it earlier on that, products, markets, etc. pivot, but actually the consistency of brand awareness is one of the most important factors. Just being consistent, whether that's on LinkedIn, whether it's, different marketing piece of material, making sure that we're consistent with pushing the brand of the organization out there. So it's always at the forefront of individuals' minds, again, from a patient perspective, or even from an investor perspective, and even from a hiring side as well.
Very good. So I got two key messages then. Focus on the meaning. So maybe not overdo it on the scientific technology side, but really attract interest because you're solving a problem that's relevant to people, and then that will focus attention on you. And being consistent, meaning, I suppose when you say consistent, Tom, you mean in terms of being present continuously over time, and maybe do not change the message too much over time. In that sense, you mean consistency, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so just, always kind of being there.
Yes.
Whether, we talk about LSI there as well earlier on as well. If you're at LSI, it's being consistent with who you're speaking with, your presence. And again, if we're talking about LinkedIn, it's having that consistent posting. It doesn't have to be every day, but it could be once a week, but making sure that you're consistent with that.
That's linked to one of the questions in the chat, actually. So there's Natalie saying, as a CEO of a diagnostic company, would you recommend building a LinkedIn post strategy to increase visibility on LinkedIn and sharpen the CEO profile? This is kind of what you're suggesting, to have a strategy and be consistent and focus on the meaning, not so much on the technology, but more on the impact you're having, no?
Yeah, I would say, and great question, Natalie. Strategy doesn't have to cost much, right? You can just have a simple strategy, and strategy can just be, and being, careful about your own resources. I mean, if you cannot do a post a week, that's okay. Just create a cadence that you think you can stick to, which is what Tom's talking about from a consistency. You can easily start with once a month, but starting to create followership where people are starting to identify, hey, this information is really interesting and it's relevant. Who is Natalie? How do I learn more about her? And, I'm sorry, Natalie, I'm using you as an example, but then having your profile talk a little bit about yourself. And I'm a huge believer in authenticity, right? Find your voice. Don't worry about, am I able to write? How are people going to feel about me? Do I have the skills? It's less important. It's more important that you get your voice out there. So when people start finding your posts, your profile relevant, they'll start following you. But I think to Tom's point again, the worst thing you can do is start creating momentum and then drop that momentum because people are starting to follow.
Very good. More questions on the chat from Dennis. Stage 1, so pre-MVP, often initiated by a researcher. There is no cash. Maybe some funds can be used for R&D, but how do you obtain cash to hire a CEO? Often you see that researchers will take the CEO role at no salary, who may not be the best, but they take no salary. Ideas, how could we attract a good CEO at stage 1? Difficult one, it's a tricky one.
Yeah, well, I can say I've been the CEO who took no salary. I don't recommend it to anybody, by the way. But it really is about finding a cultural fit and trying to find someone who believes and passionately believes in your product, right? Or your therapy or whatever it may be. It's not easy, and you always run the risk of really, what is this individual staying here for long term? But it never hurts to ask. And oftentimes executives, and this is very prevalent, oftentimes executives are coming off a corporate career looking to do something in terms of impact. And that could be somebody at a manager level, director level, VP level. And I mean, Tom and I have worked with people who have been lengthy CEOs for big corporate companies who are now looking for just board roles. So people always have a certain stage and a certain mindset where they're ready to do something from a give back perspective. Now, how do you do this? Personally, I've always relied on network. When I've been in a similar situation looking for somebody, I talk to people that I know in corporate or I know in investors, and I ask them, do you know of anyone? Or I'll go to conference and I'll say, listen, at the moment, we're not in a big cash position. We're looking to do equity over, perhaps milestones to funding. So it really comes from your network. But my short answer is, it's not impossible. And I won't always say you're sacrificing quality. Just trust your message, your company ethos, and somebody will be attracted to that.
There's another question on the chat. All of the questions I'm seeing are really good and really difficult ones. In transition from stage 1 to 2 and from 2 to 3, when the current CEO is so in love with the company and the product, how and why will he or she make way for a new CEO who's better for the new stage? Just a difficult one again. How do you think this is happening? I guess the founder should have that vision, no, the experience to say, look, this is a time for me to step aside. But how do you see that happening? Tom, do you want to take this one, or Ajay?
Yeah, this is definitely Tom's question.
Yeah, so that transition from stage 1 to stage 2, you generally will have somebody who is that founder, but they're very, very technology focused. Generally speaking, and I'm not saying this is obviously guide only, and it's very there's different nuances and different every different situation, but generally they'll be very technology driven. Fantastic for getting the company where it needs to be from a product perspective, but actually when we start looking at real build and scale out, investors or board level individuals will then start to look at the expertise of other individuals who can then kind of widen and scale up the organization fundamentally. So generally speaking, we will see people who are more focused on R&D and technology, and they're generally better focused on that. If the mission of the organization is to get product to patient, generally speaking, somebody who's focused on tech will be more focused and want to drive that transition. And then we look to bring somebody in who can do the overarching scale up organization build, who maybe has experience across clin, reg, qual. Fundraising is one of the big aspects as well. And having the time to go out and do fundraising and trying to build a product. I'm sure Ajay can attest to this as well, is a pretty complex management of time as well. So that's generally how we see that transition. It is sensitive. There has to be a partnership there. There has to be a realization from both parties that, there might need to be a transition. And we've seen it successfully happen on a number of occasions as well. Stepping into that, I think I've seen the question as well from stage 2 to stage 3. That could be a little bit more complex, but generally, again, it's focused on that commercialization. How do we scale up? How do we bring those lightning rod people into the company to then elevate it to the next level? So I'm sure Ajay will have a few points on that stage transition as well.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, Enric, and I'll be short about it, is it's really important to, on both ways. If you're a leader or a founder, it's also quite important, and it's not an easy thing to do, but you've got to be, emotionally intelligent to realize there may become a point where you're not the right person for the company. And sometimes it's also having mentors in the investment or board area where they say, Ajay, you've done your part, the company's great, but we need to take it to that next level. So I would say good leadership is also a reflection of emotional intelligence.
It's difficult. It's difficult to realize you have to let somebody to do it instead of yourself. This is a difficult one.
Right. Yes.
Very good. Thanks for your comments. Another good question. So Regina is saying, so if you are in academia and you can continue developing the assay in academia, when should you transition that assay development work to a company? She's suggesting, well, I can get non-dilutive support in the company rather than requiring investors and creating the team and needing, what's your intuition? When should the technology be moved out of academia into a company and then quickly build a team and require investment? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think, look, I'll specifically talk to the case study that we shared. In this study, the assay went through CE marking approval around 2014. And that, I would say, a regulatory milestone is a phenomenal flag to realize you have commercial viability, right? There's no better endorsement than getting a CE, FDA, in Australia, it's TGA. When you get one of these regulatory approvals, that tells you right there, okay, I've got in simplistic terms, the regulatory agencies believe there is a clinical viability for this product. So at that point, you'll have some conglomerate of investors. Like it or not, investors are going to want the company to scale. So it really depends on where you're at pre-reg. Have you really gone into clinical studies? What your clinical study results are? In simple terms, if studies are showing great performance and efficacy, to use a clinical trial word, your regulatory agencies are starting to approve. Now you really have commercial viability. So I would say that's the transition point. Now, other things you're going to have to think about is scale in manufacturing. That's another question, right? Where are you actually producing the product? But to me, it's that milestone of clinical study results and reg that becomes your transition.
Very good. Any thoughts on that, Tom?
No, I think AJ's covered everything there.
Thanks. Yes. The other thing I could suggest is, so having the company, in response to Regina, having the company sometimes opens up other non-dilutive opportunities. So it doesn't close the door to non-dilutive, because in our case, we offer non-dilutive to startups as an entity. So you can get non-dilutive from the academic side and from the SME side, get the regulatory event to happen, and then sort of expand more the company side. So those options are still open. Another good question. So that's a difficult one again. Some countries traditionally pay lower salaries. So it's difficult to attract good people to come from abroad, because of course in those, you cannot change the salary scale too much in those countries, but you can have very good technologies and very good companies. How do you attract people to those countries where the salary range is going to be lower? And those CEOs might come from a Nordic country with 50% premium in terms of salaries. How can you attract those? Who wants to take this one?
Tom, do you want to go and I'll add?
Yeah, for sure. So I think a lot of the partners that we've worked with, generally, European organizations, let's say, they've brought CEOs from the US, and we're very aware that salaries are very different. But I think this is an element of the important factor of utilizing either a good brand or B, a executive search firm, is being able to dig into the market and understand why people would make that transition. So we have to dig a little bit deeper there as well, as opposed to just pushing that we need a CEO in, it could be in Italy, it could be in Switzerland, wherever it may be. A lot of the time we as individuals have to dig a little bit deeper into a potential CEO's personal situation. They could have been in the UK, they could have been in Sweden for, the past 5 or 6 years, but actually their entire family is in Italy. They want to move back. They want to have their family around them, have young kids. So that's what we start looking into, is more of that kind of the softer side of things, as opposed to directly on the skill set element and what the cash and salaries are really going to be. But yeah, really great question. Something that we do have to navigate a lot, but I don't think there's any defined strategy of having to have somebody who's national, local talent. I think it's more focused on how we bring the right individuals in to scale up an organization. And generally speaking, if we get that brand, we get that mission right, and we get that push of product into the market right as well, we will be able to attract and bring in the right individuals. I'm not going to say irrelevant of salary, but certainly it's not the first consideration, especially when we get into that C-suite CEO level.
Very good. Ajay, do you want to add to that?
No, I think Tom did a great job. I mean, maybe the only other thing I would say is leadership who come from other countries, you just got to figure out what is their motivation. And that's really where people like us get involved. People aren't always looking for money. I know it's a strange statement to make, but when someone has had 25, 30, 40 years of experience, they're really looking for, how can I help? How can I truly make an impact? So it really matters, when you need national talent, when it's emergency, urgent, go for it. But when you have the time and the bandwidth to really look for other people, I would look abroad as well. I mean, people come and join things for various reasons. So just wanted to add that to Tom's.
Very good. We ran out of time. I think we should wrap it up now. So I'd like to thank you both for your time and being involved. Honestly, this angle of looking at startup building from the human resources side, I think we should do more of that, particularly in the AC. We focus so much on the technology, and then if you think team, you make strategic decisions. I think we should involve you more in the process of building the companies. So again, I'm really, really thankful that you covered some time for us, Ajay and Tom, and thanks to the audience as well. And let's stay in contact. To the audience, do not hesitate to get in touch with Ajay or Tom. And I hope to continue our communication over time. So thanks so much, everyone, and have a great day, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks all.